Okay, let's start today's discussion with a little history lesson. How many of you have heard of Dale Carnegie and his book, Winning Friends and Influencing People? Well, when I was growing up, it wasn't only a business book that we frequently referred to, but almost a formula for being successful in life. Carnegie was an American writer and lecturer and developer of courses in self-improvement, salesmanship, corporate training, public speaking, and interpersonal skills. He was born in the late 1800s into poverty on a farm in Missouri, and he was the author of the very famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. But what does the musings of a Missouri farmer from 2 centuries ago have to do with procurement today and for our future? Well, actually everything, because relationships are and will continue to be the core skill you need to be successful in your roles. Why? Because people buy from people, not companies. Procurement is really a relationship business. And even when you have your chatbots, your AI, and every other digital tool imaginable fully operational, you will still have to be in the center of it all, making critical final decisions, using your humanness to make judgments and to influence others to help you and your business stay on track. One of the fundamental Carnegie principles is that you can win friends and gain more influence by packing away your ego and always finding the win-win in a situation so that both parties feel engaged and successful. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I'm delighted today to be working with ProcureAbility, who've been doing a lot of thinking about human-centered design. Like me, ProcureAbility believes in the power of community, authentic relationships, and the procurement ecosystem. They believe that procurement organizations of the future will need to do the right thing for employees, internal stakeholders, clients, suppliers, and business partners. They also recognize that doing the right thing by people also means that you're doing the right thing for your bottom line as well. So I'm delighted to be joined by Kristen Rellihan, an advisory director and director of operations for ProcureAbility. Hello, Kristen. How are you?
Hi, Tania. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am really excited to have this conversation with you and be able to share all of the great things that we see and that we do with our clients every day.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, as you and I have talked about, in procurement and supply chain, we've got to work with so many different people, but the fundamentals are often the same. So today I'd like to really have a conversation with you to explore the fundamental skills that you need to develop and to use different examples of how we can use these skills with our stakeholders. So does that sound like a plan?
It's perfect. Absolutely.
Kristen, it was great to talk to you in preparation for today's discussion. And I think we both agree there are really 4 key skill areas that we would like to share and discuss with our audience today. So what we thought is we'd cover authenticity, listening, making others feel important, and appealing to a higher purpose. So hopefully everyone's happy with that. And Kristen, are you still okay to talk through those issues?
I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. Well, look, I guess the first thing is, why does procurement need to change? So we finally have the recognition and attention that we've always craved. It did take a global pandemic, but we certainly have the full attention of the C-suite, our seat at the table, if you like. But this now brings a whole new set of requirements on procurement and supply chain to really keep that seat at the table and grow our position of influence in the firm. So, Kristen, do you agree?
Absolutely, Tania. We are so thankful to have a seat at the table, and we worked hard to get there. But now that we're there, we have to earn that space every day and demonstrate why we are part of that conversation and collaborators with all of our stakeholders, all of our clients, all of our suppliers, and everyone else that we work with day in and day out for the success of the projects and for the organization.
Absolutely, Kristen. But as we know, the move from tactical to strategic means that we really need to improve an important skill set, relationship building, which means we need better communication. Kristen, what do you think the new skill set is, and why does procurement need to change?
Yeah. You're so right that it takes a different type of skills and different tools in your toolbox to be successful in procurement. And I think they're right here, right? We need to listen. We need to really listen and not be problem solving while someone else is speaking, but hear them and take a minute and really absorb it so that our solutions, our recommendations, we're hearing the words that they're saying and what's happening behind the scenes so that we can help them to solve the problems that are really hitting them day in and day out.
And in the past, I've often referred to the procurement profession as an Amazonian tribe, almost, isolated from the rest of the world, working in our own little silo. But we really can't do that anymore. What do you think we need to do to be at the intersection of business and our external stakeholders?
Yeah, I think you're so right. We have to be really integrated. We need to be viewed as an extension of each other's teams and not threats to each other. So when I work with my stakeholders, right, I am not the SME in whatever area that they're working in, but I am the facilitator. And my job is to translate their business needs and understand them just enough, right, that I can be effective in my job. But if we complement each other and if we work together, that's where we're most successful.
Yeah, no, exactly. That complementary building relationships. And I also, think of it almost as a network hub, which is going to be even more than important. I know at ProcureAbility, you talk about an ecosystem. What does this network or ecosystem mean to you, Kristen?
Yeah, it is an ecosystem, right? And we all need to maintain balance, right? If one group is putting more or pushing more for their agenda and not listening to others, if we're not hearing what our suppliers are saying, right? When we're in conversations and negotiations with them, we collectively can't be successful. So we have to find that balance by everyone listening, understanding, and acting for the good of the team.
Yeah, exactly. Heading in the same direction. I love all the work that you are doing around human-centered approach to managing suppliers. Do you want to share that with our audience here today as an example of, this network approach and building relationships?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we're clear because clear is kind, right? That we understand and we measure what success looks like for each other. So we do that with KPIs. We do that through regular cadence of meetings and discussions. And we do that through being honest and fair with each other. And I really think that taking some of the humanness into our day-to-day work in business is what enables us to work successfully together and have those long-standing relationships that really enable progress.
Absolutely. I've said for many years, we've got all this technology at our fingertips, but actually it's our humanness that's actually going to give us the competitive advantage. By building these relationships, we're going to get the innovation, the support, the supply that we need to keep our operations running. So look, we've had a great chat about the importance of relationships and building sort of a network hub and support, but let's take a bit of a deep dive now into those skills that you and I talked about and we believe are really important. And I think authenticity was something that was very important to you. And I remembered a story that, I love Andrew McCaskill. He worked with me for a while and he's now a LinkedIn top influencer. He used to tell me a story about that so many people sort of put on a mask before they go for work each day because they don't feel they can show their true selves, their authentic personality at work. And I've had the same question about social media from people. That is, do I need to project a different image on social media to who I really am? So, Kristen, what do you think? Do you think people feel like they need to be a different person at work or at home?
You know what? I think they do, but I think it's changing. And I think the global pandemic was one of the biggest steps we took to finding our authentic selves, because when everyone was working from home, you had a myriad of things happening in the background, right? Pets walking by, children walking by, doorbells ringing. And I think it took down the curtain a little bit and everyone was able to connect a little bit differently. I really hope that as we evolve and as we grow in our careers, we get more comfortable. I think a lot of times we have to, find comfort in ourselves and allow ourselves to be vulnerable and share. And then our authentic self comes through. It's a lot of work to not be your authentic self. And once you get comfortable enough with having those relationships and those conversations, I think things just happen much more naturally. And you're so much more effective in the work that you do because you're not trying so hard to be someone else.
That's right. I love that point, Kristen. It's exhausting. You're putting in all that work to try and, as you say, be someone else. And that could be energy that could be spent really channeling into building relationships or any other part of your life. So, yeah, give yourselves a break, relax, and put that energy somewhere else. I love that tip. And of course, research and the best advice has shown us how successful leaders are authentic. So even Mr. Dale Carnegie himself cited authenticity as an important leadership trait. So, Kristen, why do you think it's important to be authentic? Is it just what you mentioned then, the exhaustion, the power, or how do you think that helps us in our leadership journey?
Yeah, I think it really does just make your job, your life more pleasurable, right? I love finding something I have in common with the people that I work with, whether it be that we're from the same hometown, or if a favorite musician, our children are the same age. Finding that connection is the first step that I like to take in building a relationship and opening up, right? I prefer to start a meeting with a little bit of small talk because I get to learn about people. And I think that when we have that connection, when we understand each other in a different way than just our business relationship, we are better teammates. And it just makes everything come together much more easily than focusing only on the paper or the computer in front of us and the job at hand.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Some great benefits to come out of that. If we look at one of the most important relationship procurement professionals have, it's with their suppliers, right? So often there's internal company information or competitive information that really can't be shared externally. So what are some of the typical challenges we have with suppliers where we've got information, but we can't share it, but we still need to be authentic?
It is a challenge, and we've come a long way from feeling like we need to win in negotiations and when we're working with our suppliers, because I can feel like I've won and I can feel like I've gotten an incredibly aggressive price or a concession in a negotiation. But if that makes it impossible for my supplier to stay in business, then I've lost. So I really think, when we work together and we think about what we need to share and how we need to understand each other. One of the lawyers that I worked with recently did just a beautiful job of trying to understand and pull out, help me understand why that clause is important to you. Why are you asking for that edit? And she sat back and really reflected on it. And I could tell that those wheels were turning because she was seeking to understand their need and find a way for her to find a place that she was comfortable with. And that's what we need to do, right? We need to hear each other. We need to listen. We need to understand and find that middle ground that we are both successful and feel good about and continue to grow the relationship from there.
I love that. Very good. Finding that mutual bond and purpose. I think we're going to talk about that a little later on in our conversation. So what would be your top tips, Kristen, if some of our listeners are struggling to be themselves at work? What are your top tips for being authentic?
So I mentioned it before, but finding a connection, find something you have in common with that individual to start building a relationship, build that personal connection with them beyond what your project is. I think that that's incredibly important. I also think taking that time to reflect after you meet with someone and work through what you heard and what the words actually meant behind them is important so that the next time that you connect, you've maybe come with a different perspective, right? We have to continue to learn. We have to continue to work harder and do things differently. Relationships aren't easy. And your relationships with your suppliers or with your coworkers aren't easy. So we have to work at it. We have to put the time into fostering those relationships and building trust so that we are successful as one team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're a bit of a Brené Brown fan, aren't you?
We are, and I definitely am. Yes.
A little bit of Brené Brown will help with all of that. Look, we were then going to talk about listening, which, as we know, is a super important skill. Active listening seems like a really basic skill, but super important, particularly in negotiations, but all our relationships. And one of the best sales tips I probably ever heard was God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So we really should listen twice as much as we talk. So, in my mind, listening is really the key to great relationships. Oprah, there's another name that probably resonates with a lot of people on the line today. She connects with her subjects through empathy, doesn't she? She makes others feel that she truly cares, and I'm sure that's very authentic. And Bill Clinton's always cited as someone who makes you feel like you're the only person in the room when there's hundreds of other people around. So that's a real skill and a gift, I should say, in true listening, empathy, and caring. So as a buyer, we're often in a position of power. Well, I don't know about that at the moment. I feel like the suppliers probably have more power at the moment, which often makes us feel that we can dictate the terms and conversations within our supply relationships. But really, there's so much that we can learn that will help us negotiate even better outcomes for our organisations if we listen. Kristen, what's your take on listening?
I try very hard to listen. And when I'm listening, let that be all that I'm doing. I think we're all moving a million miles an hour, and our brains are thinking through so many different scenarios and trying to problem solve and trying to think what's coming next, that we're not hearing the words that are being spoken to us. So I think all of us taking the time to be intentional and listen and absorb, embrace the silence, right? When someone finishes speaking, you don't need to jump in right away. You don't need to cut them off and start speaking before they've finished. Sit with it, absorb it, understand it, and then respond. And I think that making that something that you purposefully do and really work at, because it is hard, helps you to better understand what they're actually saying to you, because it might be reading between the lines too.
Reading the body language, but it's consciously concentrating, active listening. So Kristen, what about some stories? Do you have any stories from mistakes made or situations created from procurement not listening?
I think we all have stories of when we weren't listening and how we felt about them afterwards. So I think for me, I have to listen to the voice inside of myself, my intuition, my experience, that might guide me a different way than what I had thought or what the direction the group was going at the time. I also think in today's world, when so many meetings are happening virtually, it's very difficult to read the room. There is not a room. There is a screen with little squares of people, and hopefully their videos are turned on so that we can at least see some facial expressions. But we are learning, we are getting better every day, and we're finding different ways to listen and different ways to understand and react that we haven't had to exercise for many years.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, while you're giving out some pearls of wisdom, do you have any tips for when you know that you don't have a good relationship with the supplier? How can you change that? How can you change your influence and implement change?
I think a lot of times relationships go sour when we have different expectations. I might expect certain KPIs to be met, but if they're not documented and we haven't been measuring them together as a team, then the relationship gets very contentious. I think also I need to hold up my end of the bargain. I need to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do, the organization's doing what they need to do to be a good customer to the supplier. So I think it really is that back and forth give and take of a relationship, and working together for clear goals, clear expectations, and a single vision is what's important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, just building on that, how do you think procurement can be a better customer, a better partner?
We have a lot of things that are within our influence. So if we're pushing for extended payment terms, which we all love, let's make sure we pay on time, right? Let's make
Yeah.
sure that we understand if we're really aiming for that with a small supplier who that might be very challenging for, that it's not a fair ask, right? I think that we need to measure ourselves and our performance against what their expectations are. I think that we need to communicate clearly to our suppliers on a regular basis and give them that time. How many times has one of your supplier partners called you and asked for a meeting and you've delayed it, or it hasn't been the right time and you keep pushing them off, maybe not responding to that email or returning that voicemail? We need to give them our time as well. We need to show our investment to the relationship and to the success of the partnership.
Thank you, Kristen, for those great pieces of advice. I know that a lot of our audience today will be struggling with their relationship with suppliers, so I'm sure there's some great nuggets in there for them to take home and work on. Look, of course, another major audience is our business stakeholders, and time again, we hear stories of how these relationships are so poor and really challenged and almost adversary. So how procurement meets with stakeholders to tell them the status of contracts and negotiations, but rarely opens up to really listen and hear the commercial challenges that stakeholders are experiencing that procurement may actually be able to assist with. So, Kristen, do you hear the same in your circles? And what do we need to do to change the way we engage and listen to our stakeholders?
I absolutely do. And I think that we've made progress, but we're still very much in our separate organization in many cases. And I think our stakeholders are often afraid that we are going to push for the lowest cost supplier or to change suppliers where they have a really strong relationship and they're comfortable with the level of service that they're getting, and disrupting that might be more detrimental than the savings that you might get. So I think you nailed it there, Tania, with saying that we need to understand their commercial challenges and their commercial strengths that they have with strategic partners and see where we can complement what they do. How can we enhance the current relationships that they have so that we enable them to be as successful as possible? We're always going to be looking to negotiate the best pricing and the most favorable terms, but it doesn't help them if they're not getting what they need out of it as well, and we're not addressing the challenges that they have.
Thanks, Kristen. That leads beautifully on to our next point, which is one of the things Carnegie said was make others feel important. Let them think that the idea is theirs. So, I think this is a really important part of building relationships. And I guess a personal story from me is when my mother passed away a few years ago from dementia, I wrote a blog about how she couldn't remember people's names, but she remembered how people had made her feel. And I reflected on how special my mother had made everyone else feel. But obviously, she also, clocked how she felt about them. Kristen, do you agree that in order to build strong relationships, we need to make others feel important? And what does that actually mean?
I do agree, Tania. And I think that we like to feel appreciated, right? We like to feel like someone has heard us and appreciates the ideas and what we bring to the table. So I do think in order to build those relationships and in order to form those partnerships with our stakeholders, we need to help them to feel like we're hearing their ideas, that we understand what's important to them, and that we'll work collaboratively to address their needs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now we're going to talk about, the other side of emotion, really power and control in our relationships. How do we maintain that power or control if we want to make others feel like they've got the power? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a tricky thing, right? So I think a lot of what we do in procurement is research and study and being prepared. So we understand what our stakeholders want. We do a lot of research to understand what's happening in the market, and we bridge the gap between the two. So I would never come to a meeting with a stakeholder without doing all of my homework and making sure that I'm prepared and understanding, just as if I were going into a negotiation with a supplier. We
Mm,
do the work, we come in understanding what is happening in the environment, and then we listen and we tie the
mm,
two together so that we can tell the whole
mm.
story.
Absolutely. One of the best leadership lessons I probably received was to make sure that my team felt like the idea was theirs. So we all want to take our team in a certain direction, but it's not easy convincing people, is it, to take the journey? Making sure they see the rationale and getting buy-in. It takes time and patience, which is something we don't have a lot of right now. So, Kristen, do you think getting ownership in direction is an important part to building employee relationships in particular? And as a secondary question, is being physically apart making it more and more difficult for us to get everyone on the same boat and heading in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years in now to everyone being remote and working in our own bubbles, certainly we've gotten better at it. At our firm, one of the things that I love that we do is find ways that we can get together through team building activities. So whether we're doing different scavenger hunts on Zoom together or having coffee breaks together, we start to build those relationships internally, which allow us to work better together on projects. I do think we need to make sure we establish a clear vision together, right? Have some ground rules for a team of, once the direction is set, this is where we're going to go, and we're going to go there together and be supportive. We don't want to have any doubts going through once we've made that decision. So I do think we all want to be running together in the same direction. And I think that you lay the groundwork for that and you do the work early on to make sure that everyone's aligned and we're all moving towards the same goal.
Absolutely. Great advice. I like the treasure hunt. I think we might steal that one. Everyone might take that one. Look, let's also talk about rewards and recognition, because that's important both if we look at employees and our suppliers. Do you think, rewards is something we should have in our toolkit?
I do. I mean, I think from an employee perspective, it's really just a core attribute that we need to have. We need to acknowledge and recognize each other for a job well done. We need to thank each other for working collaboratively, for putting in some extra thought and research in something that really helped us move ahead. And we need to thank each other and recognize it beyond the one-on-one, right? Let others know that this individual has done something extraordinary.
Mm.
And with our suppliers, right, I think that there is the opportunity through developing KPIs that you establish a baseline, but there's also that stretch and there are rewards that come along with that. So finding that place where you can establish fair goals and stretch goals and talking about what the reward might look like whenever they achieve them, just incents a little more sense of maybe
That
competition, right?
that little kicker,
Yes.
that little extra thing. Exactly. Look, well, we've started talking about mobilizing our teams and moving them towards sort of a higher purpose. And as we know, there's probably nothing more powerful than bringing people together and building relationships around a common purpose or challenge. And let's face it, procurement has so many challenges right now. We've got the fight against modern slavery, we've got climate change, unethical work practices, even just the fight to stay in business during this pandemic. So there are so many issues that we can unite around with all our stakeholders, employees, and suppliers right now. So, Kristen, my question for you is, what is the power of these external threats to help us build stronger relationships now?
I mean, I think we all love uniting together towards a common goal, right? So 3 years ago, when the world shut down, it was amazing what was accomplished over a weekend. We all somehow took our businesses that were in person and everything got set up at home because we were united towards a single goal. And I think that when we do that with teams, when we align on what our goal is and we set that direction together,
Yeah.
we want to achieve it, right? We like being parts of teams. Teams are fun. They challenge us to be better. And we, I think, just work better whenever we have that common goal that we're trying to achieve.
A lot of what we talked about at the start of this conversation was about being authentic and listening to others. And in a way, that means demonstrating with humility. But is there something to be said for talking more publicly about procurement with purpose? Your diversity plans, for example. Like, should we be publishing our plans for some of these things? Kristen, what's your thoughts?
I know there's often a lot of hesitation about publishing those plans and putting those goals out there because what happens if we don't achieve them?
Yeah.
But I think that that's being very short-sighted. I think by recognizing and putting out there that your organization has goals and you are working hard to achieve them demonstrates a commitment to a greater purpose. And if we keep them to ourselves, there's no one left to celebrate with us when we actually meet and exceed those targets and those goals.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're coming to the close of our conversation today. So let's look to the future. Just an easy question for you, Kristen, to end up today's conversation. Where do you think our relationships need to be in the future, and how we're going to get there?
It's a great question. And I will just look right into my crystal ball here and try and answer you. I think a lot of what we talked about today is the answer, right? So in 3 years or in 5 years, we really need to continue the work that we've done to build the relationships with our internal stakeholders, to be viewed as one extended team working together towards a goal. We need to strengthen our relationships with our suppliers, with all of the different economic factors and influences. We need to work together and to understand each other. And that takes listening. It takes being authentic. And at times it really takes being vulnerable and admitting mistakes, admitting things that are challenging to you, and working together with stakeholders, with suppliers, and working to find that happy place where we can all find success, where we can all grow together, and we can all feel like we've won.
I love it. What a beautiful way to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Kristen. I've loved chatting with you today.
I really appreciate getting to speak with you too. Thank you, Tania.
Thank you. Well, look, I don't think the timing could be better for talking about relationships. So I hope everyone in our audience today has got a lot of information, a lot of to-dos out of the discussion. Please visit ProcureAbility.com to learn more, or reach out to Kristen or myself if you've got any questions. So hopefully we've given you some great advice to keep you going. So see you all soon.